Welcome back to our discussion, Voices of Government IT Accelerating the Path to Digital Government, sponsored by SAIC and Microsoft Federal here on Federal News Network. My guests today are Jason Payne, the Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft Federal, and Blake Nelson, the Vice President of Platforms and Cloud at SAIC. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And let's talk about a little bit of the organizational construct that you need in this new era of development of distributed applications, of cloud first, and really it's all about digital services and what it is you're actually offering, both to your internal customers and especially important now to the citizens and taxpayers that are availing themselves of government services. So it used to be an IT thing. It's no longer an IT thing. Who do you need to be involved, and what are some good ways to set it up so that the agency will have success and therefore the public will?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand. I love the technology behind the cloud, but the cloud is really ultimately a business model. And a lot of agencies are adopting the how around cloud adoption, migrations, and it's a fine way to start, right? I mean, you got to have an entry point. And I think the agencies are really learning now because migration and that cloud adoption is moving forward quickly, but they're trying to go, further along that cloud journey, past the technology disruptor phase, and really getting into that enabler phase, the business outcome phase, and hopefully, in a year or two here to the business disruptor phase. I mean, and that's really where I think a lot of agencies are, moving away from just cost as a factor to saying, how do I really enhance my mission and really change the way we do the business of the federal government, whatever agency that is. And that's the mindset I think a lot of folks are taking, and a lot of the CIO leadership are really looking at multiple stakeholders within their agency, not just the guys and gals doing the ones and zeros in the technology, but who the business folks, and then really ultimately the consumers, right? So on the civilian side, it's your citizens, and on the defense side, it's the soldiers, airmen and women, Marines, and sailors.
And what about the chief data officers? That's a relatively new position, and now it's mandated, and most of the agencies have one. How do they relate to IT and development? Because I think it varies from place to place.
Yeah, Tom, I do think it absolutely varies. I think we've seen, this concept of chief data officer become, very prominent, certainly within the government space and even within the private markets as well, right? In the commercial and industry spaces, but, really looking at a way for organizations to have a defined data strategy, really understand what their assets are. How can they enable secure and compliant access to that data? And then really, what are they doing to enable driving outcomes from that data? We effectively see a lot of times now kind of the mission owners, if you will, whether it's the civilian or the defense space, partnering with a chief data officer around those two outcomes, particularly as you look at new technologies or emerging capabilities within government around machine learning and AI, really those disruptive types of things. And so, I like to look at it as, a way really that we're seeing this bridging of a gap between sort of traditional enterprise IT organizations and program delivery within the government. I think by and large, we've seen more and more success for digital transformation occur when there's a real partnership there, as opposed to, kind of higher walls and moats around organizational constructs or fiefdoms.
And what about the data center people themselves? Because even though, as you mentioned, Blake, the cloud is essentially a business concept, a business approach to having your computing infrastructure, when you do have hybrid with commercial cloud and data center, isn't that going to necessarily change the nature technically of your data center? Because you can't have separate architectures and separate instances of the same application, one for the data center and one for the cloud. So do you find that the people operating those data centers may have a traditional kind of approach? Are they able to update themselves so that they become, in effect, operators of one instance of your cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, cloud it's going to be an all hands on deck issue, right? You're going to take these folks that were doing it one way. We're going to have to work with them and change skill sets a little bit, right? So it's going to be that evolution. And as, that hybrid there's still going to be workloads on-prem, and you're going to have that architecture work with your cloud. And so you're going to have to take that human capital that's doing that stuff today and train them and get them moving along, the curve of change that comes from these hyperscalers like Azure. I mean, I think, Microsoft and Azure puts out, hundreds, if not maybe thousands of cloud services, new services a year. And, it's almost impossible to keep up with them. And that's a good thing, right? I mean, these things are coming out and they're helping innovate. And so I think from a human capital standpoint, people are always going to have to be learning. They're always going to have 10, 15, 20% of their year dedicated to upskilling. I know I do. And I still am not a subject matter expert in, nearly everything that, maybe 10% of the cloud, right? And so I think, it's an opportunity for everybody to kind of to keep skilling themselves up. And I think that skill sets is easily learned, and you're going to be able to take those folks that are doing that traditional architecture on-prem and really turn it into a hybrid solution pretty quickly.
And time to retire everything you knew about 3270 protocols and get with the 21st century. And that brings up the issue too, though, that if you get dependent on these many services that cloud providers roll out every year, agencies necessarily worry about vendor lock-in. So is all of these good things, speed, agility, and low cost, and all the benefits of cloud and even hybrid cloud possible with multiple cloud vendors nowadays?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. And I think, the reality that we see from government customers is that all of them are embracing a multi-cloud strategy. And, Blake highlighted there's elements of the multi-cloud strategy that I would argue are hybrid cloud as well. It's on-prem, multiple, hyperscale cloud providers, and then an edge strategy. And so I think government agencies need all of these to effectively deliver on their mission. And, there's a certain element of that's mitigating government service delivery risk, whether those are citizen services or whether those are things that are supporting, soldiers, airmen, and naval officers as well, alike. I think the other thing that comes to mind is that, there's best of breed capabilities that each cloud provider brings to market. And there's opportunities where, a mission need could take advantage of those, either from a speed point of view, a resiliency point of view, or even an operations perspective, right? There's benefits that government agencies could take advantage of. And then we also see a lot of government agencies taking strategies to adopt interoperable technologies to treat cloud service providers and platforms as, utility computing, right? The software-defined nature of it can lend itself that way, and the containerization of workloads and utilizing those types of technologies allows an amount of portability to be able to move across some of these cloud environments when government needs dictated. And that's to be expected in this market.
Yeah. Do government agencies or the practitioners ever tell you, well, we need this service from you, Microsoft Azure, to be compatible or interoperable with XYZ Cloud's service, and then you'll make that happen?
Absolutely, we do, right? We hear interoperability demands from our customers all the time, whether they are supporting open source technologies that are prevalent both in on-prem environments as well as other cloud providers, or whether they are cloud native standards such as CNCF, which a lot of our services adhere to, such that they could move those capabilities between cloud platforms. I think that's a reality of the market as well, and something certainly at Microsoft we're happy to provide to our customers.
What are some of the other challenges you see agencies facing as they try to get deeper into the cloud and orient themselves in development toward the cloud?
Some of the challenges I think are, there's some acquisition challenges, but I think that the big challenge, and agencies are getting a lot better at this, is having a strategy and a plan and making sure it's flexible, right? The strategy has to have an actual approach to it as well, right? Test and fail quickly. But looking at how do you want to have your entry point to the cloud, or if I'm going to refactor after I lift and shift, what happens then? What happens? Do we have a plan in place to operate in the cloud and take advantage of cloud native services, serverless architecture? The chief data officer is really looking at how do I make my data the new oil and be extremely valuable? But hey, how am I going to, what's my plan to be able to talk to different organizations about getting their data in the first place, right? So having that framework in place and always testing that framework, multiple times a year, I think is the key to a successful journey inside the cloud.
And how should agencies approach cloud deployments with cost control in mind? Because cloud services are not free and data egress can be expensive and movement and so forth can be, and traffic adds up. They have to have the movement in order to have computing take place. But what's your best advice for helping them through this in such a way that they have maybe predictability of cost, and which I think maybe is just as important as total cost in some sense?
I think, Tom, it's an interesting point to bring up. And I think maybe the first thing I would recommend, all agencies do is partner with their cloud service provider. I know Microsoft is not alone in this, but we are more than willing to help agencies understand what their workload might look like in the cloud and provide options, through our architecture frameworks for them of paths that they can take to effectively balance, cost and performance, or cost and speed, or cost and agility. I like to think of, cloud workloads effectively as, a balloon that you can squeeze and sort of, you can control something in one section and let it expand and grow in another. The other thing I would say is that, we provide a robust set of cost management and budgeting tools within Azure. So there's an effective way for government agencies to get complete transparency into their spend and to learn to control that. So it's important to have those governance capabilities in place on the government side to effectively take care and take advantage of the tools and capabilities from the cloud service providers.
So they don't get a monthly tab with 10 million lines of cost items that they have to sift through, but they get some kind of a dashboard approach to.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Blake, do you advise clients, federal clients, to have one workload, say this cloud, and if you have a multiple cloud strategy, that workload with that cloud, or can even that be interoperable, the same workload in two different clouds?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be interoperable. We stress this. If multi-cloud is their, the way they want to go, the defense side is definitely, a multi-cloud approach. The civilian side has a little that wants to be a little bit more focused. But, I think having them, have that flexibility, be able to move back and forth. It's not necessarily a cost thing, although that may start out that way. It's more about how they can take the mission, the capability, and bring it to the mission, right? There's an anecdote with one of our Air Force customers. They built this capability in the cloud to track how airplanes refueled in the cloud and how they can route them faster. And they saved in 2 or 3 years, $250 million worth of fuel costs. When you get that big a number from savings because you created some algorithms in the cloud, you stop asking how much the infrastructure costs to make that happen, right?
That's a great point.
And so when when Azure and Microsoft does a great job about like reserved instances and savings plans, but I think when they start seeing that all the things that you can get out of the power of Azure, how that saves money and the speed to mission, the cloud economics conversation changes.
All right, Jason, final comment?
No, I think the last point that Blake brought up there is a fantastic one. I think, driving from the perspective of outcomes and the benefits that you're going to reap as a government agency is the right place to start. There's always levers that we can pull on the government budgeting and cost efficiency side.
All right. I'd like to thank today's guests for a great discussion. Blake Nelson is the Vice President of Platforms and Cloud at SAIC, and Jason Payne is the Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft Federal. I'm Tom Temin. You're listening to Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, please visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search SAIC.